tonight. We are being live streamed, so we are still having a few folks coming in, but I think this is a good time to get started. So thank you all of you for joining us. My name is Joe Barrios. I'm the president of the DC Latino Caucus, and this is our regularly scheduled board meeting. And so we do have a very special panel lined up this evening, and we will start with that. We will be doing that for about 45 minutes. And then from there, we will move on to our regular board meeting business, and anybody is welcome to stay for that portion of our program as well. Without further ado, I think that I'm going to introduce our panel, since we do have all three panelists here, and we will take it from there. So thank you once again, everyone, for joining us. Ranked choice voting is a topic that had very spirited debate in DC last year, and that continues. The DC Latino Caucus went on record over 1 year ago endorsing ranked choice voting as a means of expanding voter access and participation, and for empowering women and people of color in running for office. And so we do continue to support that. This is an educational event entitled Preparing Our DC Latino Community for Ranked Choice Voting. And so we're going to have a chat about that. So we have, at this time, we're honored to introduce three distinguished panelists who will be joining us this evening. First, Ms. Johana Bencomo, who currently serves as Las Cruces City Councilor for District 4, where she has focused her efforts on ensuring that the city prioritizes anti-poverty efforts to improve the quality of life for all Las Cruces. Ms. Bencomo also works with the national organization Women's Democracy Lab, supporting Indigenous women and women of color in elected office throughout the country. Ms. Bencomo was born in Colonia Aldama, a small town in the state of Chihuahua, Mexico. She migrated to the United States with her family when she was 8 years old. Ms. Christina Henderson currently serves as at-large council member on the Washington, D.C. Council. In 2021, Councilmember Henderson introduced the Voter Ownership, Integrity, Choice, and Equity Amendment Act of 2021, also known as the Voice Act, to implement ranked choice voting in the District of Columbia. Prior to joining the council, Ms. Henderson was a deputy chief of staff for Councilmember David Grosso and directed the council's Committee on Education. She also worked for DC Public Schools and the New York City Department of Education. Ms. Maria Perez is the co-director of Democracy Rising, which works directly with community groups advancing democracy reform to build effective organizing, education, and advocacy strategies, and to ensure just implementation. She is a national expert on the issue of ranked choice voting. She was previously director of Fair Vote New Mexico and the campaign manager for Common Cause New Mexico. She was born and raised in Ecuador and immigrated to the United States in the 1990s. So with that introduction, I did just want to add one more comment. We were unfortunately not able to secure a Spanish translator this evening. We do endeavor to do that for these presentations, so we'll try better in the future, but we will be providing a transcript or some artifact in some form that will capture what we've discussed tonight, and we will make that available on our website. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists in the same order in which I introduced them. Each of them will have 5 minutes to discuss more of their background and the particular perspective they bring to this discussion. And then our board member, Jacqueline Castañeda, who has served as our ranked choice voting liaison for this past year, will be moderating a Q&A discussion with our panelists. We do invite members of the public to please post any questions that you may have into the chat, and Jacqueline will pull questions from there for the panelists as time allows. So without further ado, Ms. Bencomo.
Thank you so much, Jose. Hi, everyone. Buenas tardes, maybe buenas noches for most of you in DC. It's certainly still light out here in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I'm very happy to be joining you all, though, today to be talking about democracy and ranked choice voting. As Jose said, my name is Johana Bencomo. I am the city councilor for District 4 here in the beautiful borderland city of Las Cruces, New Mexico. We are about, 45 minutes from El Paso and the second largest city in New Mexico. As my bio said, I'm originally from Chihuahua, Mexico. My family and I actually yesterday was the 25th anniversary that we migrated to the United States. For a long time, I didn't know why we left. It wasn't until I was in college getting my bachelor's in government that I learned about NAFTA and the ways that impacted small farmers in rural Mexico and why millions of us left to either bigger cities or migrated to the United States. And that was the story of my family. I was 8 years old. My dad at the time was the only one with legal status. He had been here in the United States the last time this country saw a pathway to citizenship and had his green card. And so, when he took his citizenship test, I was 16 and became a naturalized citizen. But up until then, I'd been undocumented with my mom and my brother for about 8 years. A privilege that not all of my family members have gotten to experience quite yet. But becoming a naturalized citizen changed the trajectory of my life. I was able to attend New Mexico State University here in Las Cruces, and that's when I moved here in 2006 and haven't left. I set my roots here, as an immigrant. I don't know if any of you have this experience, but leaving your home country is traumatizing and difficult, and it often takes a lifetime for us to find another home. And many immigrants don't ever find that feeling ever again. I'm lucky enough to have found that here in Las Cruces. And I earned my bachelor's in government, my master's in social work, which is where I found community organizing. And that absolutely changed my life. I did community organizing for almost 8 years with an organization called New Mexico Café Comunidades en Acción y de Fe, with the Faith in Action National Network, and doing a lot of immigrant rights organizing, economic dignity organizing, and of course, lots of civic engagement. Through that work, I was invited to participate in Emerge. Emerge America, Emerge New Mexico is a program that trains Democratic women to run for office. And then don't only train us, they train us to win. In New Mexico, we have an 86% win rate, and I'm included in that. I'm a class of 2008, left with a huge desire to run for office. And when my city council district opened, I ran in 2019, which happened to be the first year that Las Cruces was using ranked choice voting, thanks to a lot of the work that Maria and so many of those colleagues did here to ensure equitable access to the ballot box. And we had a mayoral's race and then 2 other council races in addition to District 4. And there was 3 of us in that race, 2 of us that were more progressive Democrats and the other gentleman who was a conservative. And honestly, I had some name recognition because of organizing, but certainly not like a traditional party person might. And, in a traditional race, I think the other woman and I would have split votes, and perhaps the third conservative person would have won. But really, I got to knock on doors, and I got to tell people who perhaps already had a sign out for my opponent and say, you know what? That's a great choice, and I would love to be your number 2 choice. And that felt really powerful. That felt really empowering for me as a candidate, and I think for voters as well, knowing that they could vote their values and really be confident in the vote that they were making that day at the ballot box. I won, and I was, I think, about 16 votes away from winning without ranked choice. But we did go to a second round, and I was able to secure the majority votes significantly in the second round. I'm just going to toot my own horn. But that's sort of the story of how I landed here. This last year, we had our second ranked choice voting election. And I'm so proud to say this, that Las Cruces, we have a mayor and a 6-person council. Every single 6-person council is filled by a woman, a progressive woman in Las Cruces. We have a mayor who's a man, and the majority are people of color. And so that to me, I think is significant. I think it's in direct correlation to ranked choice voting. And so I'm so happy. I'll end there, but I am so happy and excited to be talking to you all about that experience as a candidate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bencomo. That was incredible. Okay, moving on to Councilmember Christina Henderson.
Thanks, Jose, and thank you so much for the invitation to join you all. I'm listening to Councilmember Bencomo, and I'm like, I wish that is how things went down here in the district. So good evening to everyone. At-large Councilmember Christina Henderson, represent the entire District of Columbia. I was elected in 2020 through y'all know what 2020 was like because you all were here. It was a mess in terms of pandemic and things changing very quickly, an open seat race for 2 seats for at-large seats and 24 people on the ballot with no ranked choice voting. And so that is basically was the impetus. Truly, I made a promise while I was running that one of the first pieces of legislation I would introduce in the district, if I were elected, was around ranked choice voting. And some people will definitely ask the question, well, the old system worked for you, you won. And I was like, yes, but the idea of someone winning an at-large seat to represent the entire nation's capital with 15% of the vote, we should all feel uncomfortable with that idea. In DC, so there were a number of things that kind of happened at the same time. As you all know, we did fair elections, which is a public financing system in the district. That was the first year that we did that. And so we also had a situation where you had a lot more people for whom the financial barriers of running for office were no longer there. And so my thinking in terms of introducing the Voice Act was around the fact that we are going to see much more competitive elections going forward in the District of Columbia, so long as we have fair elections as an option and a viable option for candidates. And we are definitely seeing that happen this election cycle. There is a primary that is happening in June, and even some races that we thought would be sleepy now have 5, 6 people out the woodwork who are running. So, for those who are the DC voters, the Ward 5 race is an open seat race. There are several candidates who are running there, and it's highly unlikely that anyone will receive 50% of the vote, just given the number of candidates that you have. We have a number of candidates running for Attorney General. I think 4 at this point. So it's a very similar situation as well. I think there are 3 people now running in Ward 1. We'll put Ward 6 to the side because I think I only know of Charles Allen who is running. There might be another candidate, so forgive me if that other candidate is on here and I don't know who you are. And then Ward 3, here we go, late out the gate, which is now also an open seat race. And I know of at least 4 people, probably 8 at this point, who are planning to jump into that race. And so essentially, what the Voice Act would do would implement ranked choice voting as early as the 2024 elections here in the district. I thought that was important because that's the year that I'm up for re-election. And so if we're gonna implement a new system, I'll be a part of that change that happens. I'm operating with the assumption that folks know how ranked choice voting works, but essentially what happens is when you get your ballot, you have the opportunity to truly rank people. So who do you want your first choice to be? Who would you like your second choice to be, third choice, and so on and so forth. That's basically it from the voter side. On the back end, once the votes are tabulated in round 1, if you will, if no one receives 50% of the vote, whoever received the least amount of votes in that particular round, their votes are redistributed to the other candidates, and you go through the rounds until you have 50%. The most high visible jurisdiction to implement ranked choice voting was New York City in this past year. They did it for their city council races as well as for their mayoral race. And we saw what happened there. 83% of voters selected 3 or more candidates to rank their ballot. Primary turnout was up 22% since 2013, the highest the city has ever seen in a decade. They elected their first majority female council, and the second Black mayor ever in New York City was also elected as well. We know from the research in other jurisdictions, as what we're, as Councilmember Bencomo talked about, this has been proven to be really, really effective and a great thing for women candidates and then candidates of color, in terms of voters truly having the opportunity to vote for who they want, not trying to game the system per se to vote for who they believe is the quote unquote most selectable person on the ballot. And so I'll stop there. I'll mention just a couple of things. So we already had a hearing on the Voice Act at the council. So now is a question of what happens next. It sits in the Judiciary and Public Safety Committee. I'm not a member of that committee. I've had some conversations with the chairman, but we still have to work on some council members who are on that particular committee to get it over the finish line. Also, we know that the legislation will likely have a fiscal impact, meaning that there's going to be some sort of cost associated with it, which is one of the reasons why we introduced it so early, to try to get it moving prior to the budget process. So we'll have that question kind of hanging over us of whether or not we'll actually be able to get this done. But I feel confident in terms of the basically groundswell of grassroots support that we've seen. And I think that once we go through this election cycle, even more people make it behind ranked choice voting as a new method of voting in the district.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. And now let's move on to Ms. Perez.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the invitation to be here this evening. It's great to be here, and it's great to hear from both council members and their thoughts and experience about this. It's always heartening to hear elected officials talk about reform in this way. I'm here basically to share with you some insights around voter engagement and education with the issue of ranked choice voting, particularly with the Latino community, but also beyond that. So I have worked in a number of jurisdictions that have implemented ranked choice voting on the first implementation and on subsequent implementations as well. And I guess, some main points that I want to share with you is that across the board, voters find a ranked ballot really intuitive, right? It's different. So it's important that voters get a chance to look at what a ballot's going to look like before before election day. But it's not, a lot of the pushback that we get about ranked choice voting is that, it's too complicated, and especially complicated for brown people for some reason, right? And older people for some reason. And that's just not the case. Like ranking something is something that we do often from early childhood on, and it's a very intuitive way of thinking about things. So that's a main thing that I want to share. As far as the Latino community, we were fortunate to do some work this year, some focus groups with different language communities around issues of democracy and representation, and specifically around ranked choice voting. And we did some work in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and in Salt Lake City, Utah, with Spanish-speaking communities. We did some focus groups about this, and what was confirmed, because I personally already knew this, having grown up in Ecuador in a Latino community, is that for the Latino community, the concept of ranked choice voting is very much part of the culture, right? Like, not around how do we elect candidates or anything like that, but the concept of reaching consensus around a decision that needs to be made by a group using ranked preferences. That's how people manage their families. That's how people make decisions in their churches. I find it that it's once you get that, it's a lot easier to talk to Latino communities about ranked choice voting than it is to talk to Anglo communities about ranked choice voting, because culturally, it's just part of our culture. It really, really is. So in terms of messaging, ranked choice voting, voter education around ranked choice voting, just, keep that in mind. This is a culturally ingrained concept that is not easy to explain to people. The other thing that I want to share in terms of voter education, when we first implemented ranked choice voting in my hometown of Santa Fe, New Mexico, it was a fight. The voters had approved ranked choice voting in 2008. The city just kind of dragged its feet for 10 years and refused to implement it for whatever reasons. So there was litigation about it, right? Like, it's in the city charter, you have to implement it. There was a lawsuit. That lawsuit took some time, and finally we won that case 9 weeks before the election. So basically, we had 9 weeks to educate the voters, which is a tall order. But it went really well. And the way that we did that is that we had planned ahead, how, if we win this case, what are we going to do? And the model that we used was, we are going to reach out to community organizations that already work with different constituencies. It doesn't have to be an organization that works on voting or democracy issues at all. Like, we work with organizations that work on housing and transit, justice, organizations that work on like youth leadership development, immigration issues, whatever the organizations were in this town that were already, that had deep roots in the community and that already had like meaningful connection to different constituencies. We did all that work ahead of time, right? Build those relationships. How can we reach those communities? What can you do? What kind of support financially and otherwise do you need to get the information out? And that's what we did. So immediately after we won that case, we came to an agreement with the city. The city was going to do sort of like the 30,000 feet approach, right? Like, put ads in the newspapers, run some like info sessions at local libraries, run some like radio and TV ads. And the group, the coalition that I was sort of managing was going to do the on the ground outreach, which was through partnerships with those community-based organizations. And that worked like a charm. These are trusted messengers, right? So like, people were knocking on doors in the neighborhoods where their organization has already been working for 20 years. So the public was very receptive to those trusted messengers. And in the end, we, in that Santa Fe election, with 9 weeks to do the voter education work, we had, I think it was 89% or something of the voters filled at least 2 choices on their ballot. About 65% of the voters ranked all 5 candidates for the mayoral election that year. Our voter turnout increased by 10%. And those are sort of the trends that you see across the board, right? There's some degree of voter turnout increase, and people do rank their ballot, whether they got a lot of education about it, or maybe they just saw like a sample ballot at some point and heard an ad on the radio. It's a good model. It's a good electoral system to engage people. It just takes effort to actually talk to people about it. And then we can get into it more cycle after cycle in terms of what Councilor Bencomo was talking about. Once you see people elected to office, when it's like people that represent your community, younger people, more women, more people of color, then you can build that civic engagement around it. So I will stop there, and we can move on with our program.
Thank you so much, Ms. Perez. So at this point, we're going to hand it over to Jacqueline and her new guest.
Sorry, she gets excited for any time I'm in a meeting. She does this so much, and she won't stop unless I carry her. So I apologize.
So go ahead and I think you have a few questions, and then I'm seeing some questions starting to happen in the Q&A.
Yes.
In the chat.
Perfect. Thank you to the panelists. You three have shared very important and also really meaningful experiences based on what you know and have learned, and also have applied with ranked choice voting. And I do encourage our guests tonight, our members here, to really take advantage of the people we have here talking about ranked choice voting, not in the sense of whether or not you may disagree or agree with it, but really having an opportunity to learn how to educate and help others understand it. I think that is really what is one of the objectives that we have here. And I think again, this is a great opportunity to really take advantage of the folks we have on our panel tonight to really give us that idea in moving forward with how we educate and advocate for our community. So I am excited to share the first question that I noticed on the chat from Sean. And Sean says, in DC, we've never seen a Latino elected to public office, and there are wards that have never or only once have sent a woman to the council. What does representation mean to you, and how have you seen RCV fix the issue? How can we get other council members on board? And I don't necessarily want to select the way to go, but I feel like maybe Councilmember Henderson, this might be a great question for you to start with, and we can go with City Councilor Bencomo as well, and with Maria afterwards too, to help share that experience.
Yeah, I actually was going to put this one to Maria only because we haven't seen ranked choice voting fix the issue in the district. But perhaps in some of the jurisdictions where she has worked, I think she talked a little bit about this in her remarks, but Maria?
Sure, I'll try to address that. So I don't live in DC. I've never lived in DC, so it's hard for me to speak to a DC specific question, but I can say what does representation mean to me in this, around this issue is that people, residents of whatever the city or the state or whoever's having an election, right? That people feel like they are included, right? That there's an inclusion of their issues that are important to them, and that can be issues that come up due to geographic location, right? Like where you live, what's happening in your area. Like, is there some environmental issue? Is there issues with at the city level, right? With parks and trails or lighting or stuff like that. And it depends on how segregated, racially segregated a city is. And I don't really know the ins and outs of that as far as DC's makeup, but a lot of times that geographically important issues also sort of break down in racial terms, right? Because people are segregated. So representation to me doesn't mean that if I'm a Latina, I must have a Latina representative in my city council. But I wouldn't mind at all if that person shares my values, right? So representation to me means having somebody who is aligned with the values of myself and my community. If that person looks like me and has a name similar to me, wonderful. It's not about what you look like or necessarily where you come from. It's really about values. And I think that ranked choice voting fits into that values proposition, because when, Councilor Bencomo could probably speak to this more, as a candidate, when you're campaigning in a ranked choice voting election, you really have to get down to the issues, right? Your position is not vote for me because all the other candidates are terrible and you should be ashamed to support anybody else. And I'm wonderful. You really have to say vote for me because this is what I care about. And this is And these are the things that I'm committing to. And then, as a candidate, that the other candidates are also going to go talk to that voter, because every vote is on the table, right? So it really becomes about your platform, your issues, your values, that connect to each single voter, whether they're going to give you their first choice vote or their second choice vote or whatnot. So that's what, to me, why ranked choice voting increases the level of meaningful representation in a governing body.
Thank you, Maria. And we'll move on to the second question I see here from Tom. And Tom asked, how can we get more candidates to advocate for RCV on the campaign trail or include it in their platform? I feel that this question might actually be well for City Councilor Bencomo, since you've been able to work with other candidates on RCV. There will be a great perspective to hear from you.
Absolutely. I was also going to say Maria should just do this whole presentation, honestly. But yes, I can definitely speak to this. I feel like certainly for a city that's working to implement ranked choice voting, I think it's really about helping people understand how easy it is, how I loved what Maria said, and it's what I was going to come here and tell you all, that I believe ranked choice voting is very much values centered. And I also think that it really does have this like genuine feeling of, I'm not going to talk badly, like it makes for cleaner elections, because I can't go to a door and talk badly about my opponent, because what if that person likes them? And the whole point is for me to try to gain a second vote. So it really does make for cleaner elections. Not always. This last year, some stuff got pretty dirty here in Las Cruces, but honestly, those people didn't win. So maybe it does work, but I really feel like it does provide for a sense of, I'm going to focus on my platform and my values and the reasons that I want to be in public office. And then honestly, in terms of using in the platform, and even to what Maria was talking about education, every single one of my mailers, my handouts had information on ranked choice voting. Like I used every single one of my materials to educate constituents about how easy ranked choice voting was. And I always made sure to say, vote for me as your number one choice, right? Instead of just vote for me. But I feel like there is a really big tie to our values that I think candidates, I think inviting them to things like this is really critical, and having them talk to Maria is really critical, because I feel like there's a lot of great folks out there who are training on RCV, not just to the voters, but for candidates. And I feel like that's really important tool to provide to candidates.
So that's a lot of great points, and also just thoughts too when it comes to campaigning and how to add that information into the material. Really great points. And I actually want to follow up with Councilmember Henderson, if you can add a little bit from your perspective of talking with your peers, or anything else that you would like to add to that.
Yeah, so I think there are two things. So number one, obviously having organizations like the Latino Caucus, if you have a questionnaire, putting that on your questionnaire, that's how candidates are going to start to talk about this issue, because there are lots of different things. Y'all know there are a lot of things going on in DC and district government. Literally every day is a new day and a smorgasbord of issues. And so to the extent that voters are making this something that they find to be important, I think that is how it bubbles up in terms of conversation. And, I have definitely seen more organizations who engage in endorsement processes or who host forums. I don't know if you all plan to host a candidate forum, but this is definitely a question that you should ask if you feel like this is something that you would want to do. To Councilmember Bencomo's point, even though we don't have ranked choice voting in DC, I ran my campaign as a ranked choice voting type of operation, because in our existing system, you have the opportunity to vote for 2 at-large council members. And so I actually think this is really important for this year. Part part of that was having to do a whole lot of education to people of like, you could vote for two people, right? Because we already have so many folks in the district. We've had this system for so long who they will go in, they will vote for the Democrat and they walk out. And the undervote in terms of the independent seat is always an astronomical number. If you can tell people, hey, oh, great. Oh, of course you support the Democratic nominee. Congratulations, vote for Robert. But you could also vote for me. And just sort of having those conversations. And so everyone who is sort of watching, like, that's a situation that we have this year. This year, you will get an opportunity. When you get your ballot in November, it will say you get to vote for 2 at-large council members. And so exercising that vote, but also, taking the time to find out information about candidates and who will support something that you're interested in doing or support this type of reform. Back to Sean's point or question in terms of getting more council members on board on this, I think it's a question that you have to ask. So like Councilmember Mary Che, who is currently in office, I can't predict what the fates hold for this, how many months we have left in the council period. But I do know that we have a council member who is leaving the council who was on the Voice Act legislation. She would have been a yes, or she will, or would have been a yes vote in the Committee on Judiciary on this legislation. And so it's super important that whoever is replacing her is a vote that is in favor as well. Like we cannot be in the business of losing people. We need to be gaining people. And so we have to be thinking, like, talking to candidates about this issue is going to be super important if we want to get it over the finish line, because we do know that there is going to be people who are rotating off the body. And if we're losing votes as part of that, then we're kind of hustling backwards as opposed to moving forward.
Jackie, I'd love to add a point about how to get candidates on board.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, one of the beautiful things about ranked choice voting is that people like these 2 wonderful council members, right, can run and be viable candidates. The point that Councilor Bencomo brought up in terms of like, had it not been a ranked choice voting election, she and this other woman would have split the vote, right? That's really important to when people are, there's organizations that recruit or train candidates, right? That's a really key point. With ranked choice voting, you don't have to wait your turn. You don't have to have a big political machine behind you. You don't have to be a fancy incumbent. You can be a broke community organizer with an awesome vision for your community and throw your hat in the race. And like, nobody's going to be telling you that you need to drop out, that you are messing things up, that you are going to throw the election towards like the person that definitely shouldn't get elected. When people are thinking about running for office, they often, this is the thing, right? Like, I'm not going to have enough money and I'm going to be a spoiler and everybody's going to hate me, so I'm not going to do it. If you remove some of these barriers, people are much more likely to run for office. And let's face it, running for office is the bravest thing that a person can do. And we need to make sure that people who are unlikely suspects, right, will actually do it. So I think that, but that requires education on the front end, right? Having conversations with people who might want to be running for office, but are feeling discouraged, do that before the filing date, right? So like this sort of potential candidate education around ranked choice voting and what it would mean for you as a potential candidate. Those are really important conversations to be having, like a year before an election.
Thank you, Maria, for the additional, and also Councilmember Henderson, thank you for reminding also that we do, when during at-large races, to vote for 2, not 1. I think that's really important to remind our residents too whenever there are elections, and also reminding them how it is close to ranked choice voting. All right, so I want to make sure that we have enough time. So I am looking through some of the questions that I think will help with us understanding more on how to engage our Latino community members in ranked choice voting. So I will pose a question, and I think this will end up going to Maria. how do you know that RCV attributed to a 10% voter increase? Was there a survey done, and were any other factors considered? I believe,
Yes.
was that, yes, okay. I want to make sure that was the right one.
So it's impossible to tell exactly what led to voter turnout increase. Like in Santa Fe, there was a short time before that mayoral election, when we first implemented ranked choice voted, there was a heated vote on a soda tax that created a lot of buzz within the town. So like that is probably attributed to that voter turnout, right? Increase. And we see this in all the jurisdictions where there's ranked choice voting, and we see like an increase in voter turnout. It's impossible to have a direct correlation because there's many issues, right? Is there an incumbent? Is it an open seat? Is there some like hot issue up on the ballot? Is there a hot race up or down the ballot? So it quantitatively, it's very difficult to attribute like exactly what led to what. But when you see the aggregate, right, like all the different cities that are doing this over many election cycles, like we do see a trend of voter turnout increasing over time. It's not like you're gonna go from like 16% to like 90% voter turnout, but it's the trend, and it's because candidates are reaching out to more voters. It's not just those undecideds that get the calls, right? Every vote is on the table. So voters in communities that haven't ever had anybody knock on their door, all of a sudden they're having 2, 3, 4 candidates knocking on their door, right? There's more candidate forums. There's a lot more effort to, not just from the sort of like advocacy community, but from the candidates themselves, for sure, to reach out to the voters, to get them engaged, to make sure they're going out to vote. So I think it's undeniable that ranked choice voting has an impact on voter turnout. It's impossible to really quantify that.
Thank you. And I will move on to the next question. How do you introduce RCV to brown voters that are disengaged in a time when many feel ignored and others are turning to other parties? Who would like to answer that one? I feel like this can go to any of you three. Councilmember Henderson, may I pass this over to you first?
Yeah, I mean, Black, brown, we all in the mix of the family together. What I find is that voters like to engage in competitive elections where you have it. I think one of the things that creates sometimes apathy in the process is the feeling of an inevitability, right? No matter what I do, the person that I like isn't going to win anyway because they don't have the machine. They're going to be seen as a spoiler, all of these different things. And I feel like for ranked choice voting, it opens up possibility, to what Maria talked about around the fact that, like, you don't have to be the richest candidate. You don't have to have a machine behind you. Ranked choice voting gives you an opportunity to present yourself and, present yourself to the voters and let them make a decision and not feel tied to it. I had a couple of friends who ran in New York City in the council races this year. And for them, and I have family who still live in New York as well. It was just exciting for them, they said, to have more than two options of one who is bad and then less bad, right? Like, let me vote my values. I have a candidate who I'm really excited about, who I really feel like for the first time ever gets me and is going to do the work and is going to be authentic to, to themselves and to the community. And so I think that's how you introduce ranked choice voter or ranked choice voting to those who feel ignored or feeling disengaged. I would say turning to other parties, because in DC, I mean, you can vote Republican if you want to, but I mean, I don't even know if Republicans even field a candidate for every office who is on the ballot. But like the point being is that I actually think that with public financing plus ranked choice voting, you light a fire in terms of how democracy can work and how democracy and what is the possibility here in the district. And I think that is how you connect with voters on that of like, we could do something different.
Jacqueline.
Yeah, I would love to jump in and let me know if you can't hear me. I have to put headphones on. So can you hear me? Okay. I was just going to add to that I think with ranked choice voting, I feel like there's a deep sense of ownership that doesn't exist with traditional elections. And Councilwoman Henderson said it, like I don't get to vote for someone who I don't agree with at all and someone who I have to like plug my nose for and then vote, right? Like sort of barely vote in support of. And I feel like here in Las Cruces, there's been a lot of criticism by the opposition, predominantly conservatives, who are saying, well, it favors progressives. But the reality is that it favors the people who do the work. If you're gonna do the work, if you're gonna go knock on doors, you're gonna talk to not just the regular, the consistent voters, but all those other regularly ignored voters in traditional elections, it really does favor the people who do the work because it goes back to values. And running in a ranked choice voting election is really about that. And if you're gonna get #1 votes, you're gonna have to talk to voters at the door. And if you want to win, you're gonna have to ask for #2 votes. And it really puts the work back on the candidate to really earn that spot.
Thank you. And I am going to be asking the last question of our conversation for tonight. And I think this really kind of goes into what we're trying to achieve and learn more. And this one comes from Joe. It says, do you have any advice for the DC Latino Caucus on how our organization and others can best educate and prepare Latino voters if RCV becomes implemented? I believe we can, says primary question for Ms. Perez and Ms. Bencomo, but definitely love to hear from all three, just a really quick, short, or like fast advice that you can give for us.
Yeah, I'll be happy to answer that really quickly. And, you know, the couple of best practices, the best way to educate people on ranked choice voting is just to normalize a ranked ballot. So, you know, there's some cities just insert a sample ballot in like a utility bill so that every household gets one. In some places, there's been campaigns to like wrap every city bus, those like wraps on the outside of the city bus, like put a sample ballot on that, and as people can look at it, right? Like, and just kind of like internalize it. There's mock elections that people can run, like rank your favorite pizza, rank your favorite ice cream, rank your favorite microbrew, like rank your favorite whatever, right? Those activities can be done like in small groups. You get 20, 30 people together, you can rank whatever, run the election, and people just immediately understand every piece of it once they kinetically, right, have to fill in a ballot, and then they see how the votes are tallied. And I'll just go back to my initial point, which is use trusted messengers. Who is already out there doing work with the communities that you want to reach? Partner with them and figure out what they need to get information out to their constituents. They already know how to talk to their people. They already know their people. They've already done work with those communities. So all you need to do is provide the information that needs to be shared and let them tell you what they need in order to get that information out there.
Thank you, Maria. And think that probably wrapping up here, then I want to say, I know there's some questions that we did not get to ask, and there might be more information that we could share also. So I want to let everyone know I did take down the questions that were not asked. And I hope to be able to follow up and be able to provide information, and also reach out to our panelists who are wonderful to provide any additional information towards those questions. So we do want to make sure that we're providing as much information as possible and really add that education piece to what we're trying to do. Those will be made available to all once we're able to complete that. But I just want to say thank you. Thank you for letting me ask these questions. Thank you to our guests tonight and members for asking these wonderful questions and participating in this conversation. I will pass it over to you, Joe.
I wanted to mirror what Jackie said. I'm very grateful and honored to have had the 3 distinguished guests speaking with us about this important issue that is currently before us in the District of Columbia. We will continue advocating. We will continue educating. And we really, really are very thankful and grateful for your guidance. I'm also very grateful for the members of our audience who have joined us tonight. I see several individuals who are candidates for the DC Council or who are staffers on campaigns. I see at least one ANC commissioner. I'm very, very thankful also for you for attending. And urge you to that if you support the mission of the caucus of Latino empowerment, political participation, please consider joining our newsletter or joining our caucus at www.dclatinocaucus.org. That will help drive our mission forward. And of course, we do have our important endorsement season coming up. So thank you very much for coming. At this time, we are going to transition to our regularly scheduled board meeting agenda. Any member of the public is welcome to stay, but this will primarily be for the current DCLC board members. So Ms. Bencomo, Councilmember Henderson, Ms. Perez, once again, thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you all. Good luck.